Anyone can observe our democratic meetings. Therefore, please remember this meeting can be watched at any time by anyone with an internet connection. There is a slight delay of the meeting and the broadcast of approximately 30 seconds. Webcasting officer, please can you commence the broadcast and confirm?
Yep, we're live now, Emma.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Governance Group. Before we commence this evening's proceedings, I can confirm the Council has adopted some basic etiquette rules for its remote meetings, and these are as follows. Please only speak where the Chairman invites you to do so. Please let the Chairman know that you wish to speak through the chat function. The Chairman will introduce the speakers in the order at which the request to speak has been made, unless there is a point of order at which we will give way. Please minimise all distractions while you are in the meeting. Members are asked to mute your microphone when you're not speaking and to consider turning off your video feed if you have interference on your connection. Please bear in mind that there may be a lag between speakers and other attendees hearing you. There is no presentations for this evening. The presentation is by Officer Kim Cole this evening, and it will be a verbal presentation. However, members, if you are referring to the officer's report, please indicate the page and paragraph number to which you are referring. There's no private business for this meeting this evening. However, members are reminded, should it be necessary to move into private session, it is your responsibility to make sure that your venue and connection is private. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, please rejoin and I will readmit you into the meeting. Please only use the chat function for the purpose prescribed of requesting to speak or for a point of order. The chat function is subject to the access to information regimes of FOI/EIR. It's also subject to data protection, rules of defamation and the Council's Code of Conduct. Officers for this meeting are identified with a prefix of officers have a prefix of officer and councillors have a prefix of CLLR before their name. There is 2 officers in attendance, Officers Kim Cole and myself, Emma Wisby, meeting facilitator. We also have a officer who has taken the minutes this evening, Jessica Mann. The committee consists of the following members. The chairman is Councillor Richard Van Dalken, and the following members of the committee are Councillor Paul Houston, Councillor David Hume, Councillor Hilton Johnson, Councillor David Mann, Councillor Vanessa Santamoro, Councillor Dean Wallace, and Councillor Tom Walsh and Councillor Lynn Waters. I will now hand over to the Chairman, Councillor Richard Van Dalken. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Emma, and good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Governance Group. As Emma said, my name is Councillor Richard Van Dalken. I'll be chairing the meeting. I'm being assisted by a governance officer and a meeting facilitator who will help me identify when people wish to speak and manage the notifications to the chat function. If in case I can't see you, please let me know using the chat function if there are any issues with your internet connection, and please remember also to mute your microphone when you finish speaking. Members, for this meeting, as usual, when I seek your agreement, silence will be taken as assent. As the meeting facilitator has confirmed the attendance of members and officers for the meeting, I'll now proceed with the business of the meeting. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I don't think we have any apologies.
Chairman, I can confirm we have no apologies for this meeting. All members are in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item, agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest that they wish to declare this evening? Please state the item and the nature of your interest, and if you wish to speak, make this clear in the chat function. I don't seem to have any
Chairman, I can confirm there's no indication on the chat function for you.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to read this off the iPad. So agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. We in fact have 2. I'll be seeking your agreement. And as there are 2, we'll do it one at a time. I'll seek your agreement and silence will be assent. If a member wishes to raise an issue in respect to the minutes, please indicate via the chat function. First of all, do any members have any objection to the approval of the minutes as an accurate record of the meeting held on the 20th of January This was a normal meeting for us, key financial indicators, a fraud update, and treasury management strategy. If you have any comments or raise an issue? No? So your silence is agreement that the minutes are an accurate record. And secondly, do you have any objection to the approval of the minutes of an accurate record of the meeting held on the 26th of January? And this was a constitution review of council procedures, cabinet procedures, access to information procedures, and the governance review, including the petition policy. Do any members have any objection to that? Thank you, members. Your silence is agreement that the minutes are an accurate record. So we'll proceed to item 4, constitution review. Members, this item is set out in the agenda, which you just received today, or most of you. And can I please invite Kim Cole, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer, to set out the report for us.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. As agreed with the Chairman, I'm proposing to take each section of the report in turn and pause at the end of each clearly defined topic, just to take questions and answers, because there's quite a lot that this report covers. So this is now the third or fourth time we've come together as a group to consider the ongoing constitution review. So we've been through chapter 1 and chapter 2, and this is starting to ease out of chapter 2, the procedurals, and start focusing on chapter 3 going forward. So if you look at the constitution, chapter 2 is where we have our procedurals. We had 4 last time, as you've heard, and on this occasion we're going to consider the next 4 this evening. So the first up is the overview and scrutiny procedurals. Now, these set out the parameters through which scrutiny plays a role in the efficient delivery of public services and drives improvements within the council. Through the legislative powers, the scrutiny committees are responsible for scrutinising the decisions the Cabinet are about to make or have made, and thereby holding the Cabinet to account for its decisions and actions. And the scrutiny committees are the function through which scrutiny is conducted on behalf of the Council. Now, as part of the ongoing consultation, the chairman of the relevant scrutiny committees, of which we currently have 4, have been consulted on this particular document. And as I work through it, I'll feed in their feedback as part of my presentation to you this evening. So I've had a look and reflected on the current practice. We're fortunate enough that we've gone through a scrutiny review in terms of the topics that each of the committees were considering. And we've had the reports go to council, and they have also now been presented to Cabinet for formal consideration. I've reflected on that process as part of my review of the Constitution. And in reality, the issue has been that what we currently do in practice is different to what is within the Constitution. So what I've tried to do is marry up the 2 processes and make sure it works going forward. So as you're aware, we go to council, we go to Cabinet, we come back to council in the current intention. What I'm keen to do is make sure that we keep that elevation of the scrutiny process within the council. So the last reports were received quite high praise in terms of the content and the topics that were considered. So we want to continue to promote that. So the new procedurals will help do that going forward. The proposal within the rules before you this evening really take out that first step. So statutory, you are only required to take your review to council if there is a need to change a budget or policy the policy framework. So there's no requirement for you to go to council, but because of the high praise and because we want to make sure that the scrutiny that is undertaken is received and captured by all members, and all members have an opportunity to feed into that process. The intention is that in the first instance, those reports, rather than going to council, will go straight to cabinet for formal recognition of it, to be formally received, and for cabinet to then have that ability to undertake the response. Once the response has been formulated by cabinet, it will then go to council together with the original scrutiny report and the responses. It will go to council for full consideration by council as a whole. And also then if there are any budget or policy framework changes that need to be made, they can be made at that particular point in time. So we're taking out one step. Really, it's just streamlining it. It is resource intensive in terms of the amount of committee meetings that are called, the reports that have to be written, and obviously your time as well. But also, if we continue on that vein, scrutiny reports receive more airing than a normal report before normal council or cabinet. So it's just trying to bring in some of those anomalies across the process. So hopefully that's okay with members this evening. In addition, the current constitution provides that a scrutiny review report, if the topic falls within a cabinet member's portfolio, the report could be submitted directly to the cabinet member for consideration, and then the cabinet member would come along to the scrutiny committee and deliver their response. Now that seems to go against what we're trying to achieve in terms of the elevation and I suppose just the elevation of scrutiny as we undertake it at the council. So in consultation with the chairman of the scrutiny committee and part of the Developing Democracy group, the proposal as set out in the report is to remove that provision so that all scrutiny reviews go directly to cabinet and then go to council. There's not the ability to undertake that private review before coming back to the committee. So that's paragraph 13 of the scrutiny procedurals would therefore be deleted. There's call-in provisions within the rules. Whilst I understand Braintree hasn't undergone call-in for quite some time, it's important that the constitution is fit for purpose and that the procedures and practices within it are robust and reflect what would happen should that be called into effect. So there hasn't been any major changes to the calling process. It is a fairly standard process, but we've changed some of the language just to bring it in line with the overall review and terminology that we've currently undertaken and make sure that the start to finish process of that call-in provision is clear. You'll also see there's a new section added called Counsellor's Call to Action. Now, this was added by myself as a discussion piece as part of the consultation with the wider group. And it's something that some councils do have. However, it's not particularly clear what the parameters of that is or how often it's used in practice. So the principle of it is that it would enable members to an additional route through which members can bring a local community issue that hasn't been solved or resolved through other means. So if you haven't had a satisfactory outcome, it would enable you a further route. Now, it's quite difficult to set parameters around that. It's been quite difficult to understand how that might look in practice, and it's quite difficult to understand what the outcome would be. So if it were introduced and it did go to a committee for consideration on a local issue, then what sanctions or what actions could the committee then impose? So it was brought as a discussion piece to see if members had an appetite for such a process, and part of that consultation has been to suggest that given all of the engagement that we currently have with members, and that members have quite a good access to officers across the council, that there are a number of routes through which a member should be able to resolve anything that happens locally. And therefore this extra provision wasn't necessary. So as part of the proposals this evening, paragraph 9 would be looked to be deleted. I'm going to pause there because that's the procedurals in its entirety, and happy to take any questions. Over to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Kim. So that's part 1. Do any members have any questions? I see Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for the presentation, Kim. A couple of questions. They're questions, not concerns. The first thing is comparing paragraph 2.4 to 2.5. Kim mentioned the change in procedure. I was just wondering, do we from council to council, and starting with cabinet, do we possibly lose something by this beginning with I can see the rationale, but by beginning with cabinet, could that mean the matter is, and I mean this in a non-pejorative way, that it can be sort of steered by cabinet to get a particular outcome?
So at the moment, statutory, all you're required to do is submit your review to cabinet for them to provide a formal response. It only then goes to council if there is a budgetary change or a change to the policy. So there's no obligation for it to go anywhere else at the moment. What we're bringing in is that extra layer of transparency by setting in the Constitution that once it's been to cabinet, their response and the original report will go to council for full consideration on the recommendations arising from cabinet. So cabinet will be able to put forward their recommendations on how they proceed with the review, or any recommendations arising out of the review itself, but it will be down to full council to approve those as they normally are, as they do now.
Kim, also, I think it's just worth pointing out that when the report goes to cabinet, it is a finished article as approved by that scrutiny committee. So it's not going to cabinet to approve; it's going there as a recommended document. So cabinet couldn't say, actually, take back your report. We want this and this tweaks to it, because it is a report of a committee that's been completed through a process.
You had another question, Councillor Walsh, or?
Yes, thank you. Yes, this is purely information. I quite like the sound of the councillor's call for action, and theoretically I can see how that might be useful. Would existing procedures not normally obviate the need for such? Or put it another way, can you give us an example, maybe through Kim or anybody, of where this might be considered a useful procedure?
I think that was part of the difficulties, and as part of the consultation that I've had with chairman of the scrutiny committees and the DGG, is that it was very difficult to find an example where this would be useful. So if you had a local planning issue, for example, then your remit would be through the planning officers. If you had an enforcement issue, your remit would go through our enforcement team. So it was very difficult to find where this would add value for the time and effort that it would take to manage it and control it. So I think where we've got to is that we are satisfied that there are significant other avenues, and the relationship between officers and members is such that we shouldn't need to have to rely on this as a final fallback position, and therefore the recommendation is we don't take it forward.
All right, Councillor. So, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to speak on call for action as well. I mean, superficially, it did appear to be attractive, and the first time I read it, I thought it might be a good idea, but at DG it really sort of fell apart for the reason that Kim suggested. We couldn't construct a scenario where it would happen. And furthermore, although some councils do have it as a sort of reserve, a last resort, they don't appear to use it either. So, I mean, we are, as I quite often say, quite an unusual council in that we do have lots of routes and opportunities for overview and scrutiny. So I think it'd be superfluous. So I agree that we knock out sort of paragraph 9. Thank you, Chairman.
Fine, thank you, Councillor Mann. Do any other members have any comments? No, I think not. So I'm not going to say any more because I've been through this a couple of times, but I also agree, as did I think the other scrutiny chairs and most of the DDG, that this would be superfluous. So Kim, would you like to go on to the second part, please?
Of course, thank you, Chairman. So the next section of the report deals with the budget and policy framework, and that governs really the process for approval of the budget and the policy framework, providing a clear distinction between the council owning the budget and the policy framework and Cabinet being responsible for its implementation. The main changes around this document were really bringing it in line with the total review terminology and simplifying it where there was a bit of ambiguity. There was one change that I just want to raise your awareness to, and that was around the process by which the leader of the council can challenge the council's outcome or approval of the budget and policy framework. So this is a statutory provision whereby if the leader of the council disagrees with the decision of council on the budget, he has a right to challenge it. Now, again, it's a provision that very rarely used, but it is a statutory provision available nonetheless. But the parameters around that are really down to us to set. So currently, because of the implications on the budget, it's very important to get it resolved as quickly and as swiftly as possible. That bit is fully understood. But what the Constitution currently says is that if the leader does seek to challenge it, then officers would have to call a full council meeting within 6 working days. Now, that is an incredibly tight timescale through which we would have to prepare reports, consider the representation from the leader, and comply with our statutory provision to give notice of the meetings 5 working days before. So what the proposals before you as part of this change is to just expand that slightly to 10 working days, just to build in an extra couple of days to enable the administrative side of that process to take place. So those are really the document itself. Other than that, timescale hasn't really changed in any significance. I'm happy to take any questions before I move on. No problems. On that basis, I'll move on then. We leave chapter 2 behind us and we move into chapter 3, which is our codes and schemes. So the various codes are set out in paragraph 3.1 for members. So what I'll do is I'll talk around the member code of conduct in the first instance. So the intention as part of the review was to look at the member code of conduct, look at where it needed to be streamlined, where it needed to take out some of the ambiguity, and try and bring a bit of clarity around interests, when you have to declare them, what interest it is, etc. However, in parallel to our review of our constitution, the LGA went out and did a consultation exercise around the possibility of bringing in a draft model code, which could be adopted and tweaked by local authorities. Now, this group participated in that consultation process. We agreed our responses to the consultation questionnaires, and that was submitted towards the end of last year. Now, the model code was considered by the LGA board in early December. And on the 23rd of December, I think it was, they approved the new model code, and that was circulated round to the local authorities for them to determine whether or not they wish to adopt it. in addition to that, if I can start that way, the Essex monitoring officers have come together, or from all of the Essex authorities, who have seen this as an opportunity to look to have in place a Essex code of conduct, so that all members within Essex would be working under the same code of conduct. So there wouldn't be any local tweaks, which is what we currently have. There's 12, 13 different codes of conducts with all various slight different variations to them. So it would certainly help our twin-hatted members, and it would certainly help members of the public understand what provisions members are being held to account for. So there was a general appetite across all Essex authorities that was a very good approach. So when the LGA released their code of conduct, we came together to give it some consideration to see if it was something that we wanted to take forward. To say we were disappointed with the draft that came out as a result of the consultation, it's quite wordy. The interests, we think, have been muddied slightly. Well, I say slightly, probably being slightly generous. They've introduced, in effect, by the way of their wording, 6 different types of interest that a member would have. Now, to our mind, that is difficult for us to understand, given the 3 or 4 that we currently have. But it's very difficult then for the members of the public to understand what your interests are and when and what you should be declaring at the relevant time. So the Essex group wrote back to the LGA, inviting them to reconsider the wording, inviting them to redraft. But if they aren't minded to do that, then the intention is that the Essex authorities will come together and draft their own code of conduct, which will then be adopted across Essex and would be fit for purpose for Essex. In light of that, it's not going to be possible to undertake that process in time for us agreeing out our new revised constitution. So what the intention is at this stage is that we keep with our current code of conduct, and that sits within the new constitution in its current form, pending those further discussions with the Essex authorities, until we get to a point where we've got a new Essex Code of Conduct drafted and ready for your consideration and then forward recommendation onto Council. So there is general approval across Essex that that's where we want to go. So it is something that's been received positively, and I certainly can see the benefits around that. So there isn't a new code for you to consider this evening, but hopefully the benefits of that delay can be seen. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions.
I'll ask a question, please, Kim. The current code of conduct, so the one that we're going to go on with until the Essex one is prepared, does that also apply to county, districts, boroughs and parishes? Okay.
No, so our current code doesn't apply to county councillors. Essex County Council have their own code of conduct. Right. It doesn't apply to any other district councils or borough councils. They've have their own. Some parish councils have adopted our code of conduct. However, there are some that haven't. They've got in place their own one, or they've taken our one and tweaked it and amended it. So as part of the wider consultation, we will be working with our 52 parishes and the clerks to build in that buy-in to adopt the Essex Constitution, so that everyone at all levels of local government are working under the same umbrella.
Well, that sounds like a good idea. Now, is that Councillor Mann or wish to speak, or
yes, Chairman,
a leftover? Yeah.
No, it's a rehash. No, I just going to support what you said, Chairman. I think that's sort of a good way forward. I mean, I was very confused myself with that list of 6 possible interests to declare. For example, I just couldn't pick my way through that. So something simpler there would be much preferred, and it does seem an excellent idea that we do try and work towards Essex uniformity. So yeah, that would certainly get my support.
So if there are no other comments, I don't think there's much more to say on that, Kim.
No, that's really helpful. I have indeed. Long may that continue.
So
okay.
would you like to carry on?
Of course, no problem. So moving on to the Officer Code of Conduct. So currently in the Constitution, we have an Officer Code of Conduct. I've been working with our HR team to give that some thought and to give it a review in preparation for bringing it here today. Now, the code as written sets out the expectations in place for officers' behaviours, sets out the principles around gifts and hospitality, political neutrality, and links it to the Nolan principles. What HR have confirmed to me is that all of those provisions are already set out within our substantial suite of HR policies, practices and procedures. So it's really a duplication. On that basis, and in line with other authorities who have also removed the Officer Code of Conduct because it is already governed within their own HR practices and policies, the proposal this evening is that we also follow that intention and remove the Officer Code of Conduct completely and rely on the HR, and officers are then in reliance of the HR policies, practices and procedures that we have already in effect. The difficulty with having lots of information in lots of different places is if HR suddenly decide to update their policies, if that's not notified to myself or the governance officers, then it doesn't get incorporated in the Constitution, and you end up over time with a bit of a disconnect between the various documentation. So part of this review is to make sure that we cut out any of those disconnects and make sure that we're working from one form of documentation wherever that may sit. So hopefully office members will see that there is benefit in taking it out of the Code of Conduct, keeping the Constitution, focusing on practice within the council and members' practices and procedures, because that's the only place it can sit, and we'll leave the officer stuff to the HR suite of documents that we currently have.
Okay. Just a question which you perhaps can't answer anyway, but would that apply to consultants?
So the Officer Code of Conduct applies, well, we have expectations on our consultants. So as part of the appointments, there would be a document that would be issued in respect of the expectations that would sit in line with ours, but I can't say off the top of my head what document that sits within, or whether it's a separate one at the time of their appointments under their contracts.
Okay. Well, hopefully it would never be an issue, but I just thought I'd ask. Thank you. So if there are no other questions, we can move swiftly on to the next, please, Kim.
Of course. So moving on then to the protocol on officer and member relationships. Now, the success of the council greatly depends upon the relationship, the positive working relationship between members and officers. And the purpose of this protocol is to enhance that working relationship. It can't be a comprehensive set of all circumstances, but hopefully it kind of governs the principles around that, and it really helps build upon that mutual trust and respect aspect of the working relationship. So there hasn't been many changes to that document. The protocol provides clarification on some of the key aspects. But the three changes are set out in 3.18 for members there. So there has been the inclusion of some additional provisions around the officer and members' roles, just to make them absolutely clear. Members' access to information has been revised so that it removes the duplication that has already been put into the access to information procedural, so that it's all contained in one place. And the provisions relevant to the decision-making and officer decision-making have also been included. So otherwise, the tweaks have really been to bring it in line with the terminology, but in the main, that document hasn't changed significantly.
Right, thank you very much. Are there any comments from members on this part? No. Well, we're on a roll.
We are. So, okay, moving on then to the gifts and hospitality. So members who participated as part of the Model Code of Conduct will recall that there was an element around gifts and hospitality and the level of gift, the level of the value of gifts and whether they should be declared and the principles around that. Because of the position in terms of the Model Code of Conduct, it was felt that it wouldn't be worth revising our gifts and hospitality policy until we see what the new code looks like, because it might be that some of those aspects will be covered within that document, or it would need to be revised at the point that that's been brought in. So again, in line with the model, or in line with the Members' Code of Conduct, the intention is to just keep the gift and hospitality process as is for the time being until we do that full suite of that process.
Fine. Any comments, members? No? Go ahead, Kim.
No problems, thank you. So what we're doing next, so we've got member allowance scheme. So the member allowance scheme sets out the basic allowance to members and also any special allowance provided as part of a particular role that the member undertakes during their course as a counsellor. It's required to be revised every 4 years. The council, in making any amendments to its allowance scheme, have to have regard to the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel. So the council's Independent Remuneration Panel met in 2019, and at that point this current scheme was brought into effect. In line with some of the wording and terminology that's been updated around the members' allowance, but in the main there hasn't been any other further changes significant in terms of changing allowances and things like that. That's not being proposed as part of my review. The members' allowance will be increased in line with the 2% officer pay award, as was agreed as part of the 2019 review. But going forward, as part of my review, there's been no other significant changes or items to note.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Can you just remind us, and not necessarily in any detail, but who makes up the remuneration panel at BDC?
So they are 3 independent persons identified as part of a recruitment process. So they are people who sit external, members of the public, people of standing within the community.
Now, these aren't the independent persons that we will be looking at now.
No, so the independent person as part of the Code of Conduct complaints process are separate to the Independent Remuneration Panel.
Does rather seem a duplication of effort, but all right,
we do look at very different aspects, and there's nothing to stop
yeah.
them being on both if they choose, if they are selected as part of the recruitment process.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Are there any comments from members on this part? It doesn't seem as if anything much is going to happen anyway, so
no, that's fine.
Right. Okay, so carry on, please.
No, that's lovely. Thank you, Chairman. So I just wanted to flag some items to note around the next steps going forward. So the Code of Conduct, not the Code of Conduct, get my words muddled. The current Constitution has within it a document titled the Code of Practice for Councillors and Officers Engaged in the Planning Applications. Now, I'm sure at the time that was put into the Constitution, there was clearly a need for it. However, when reviewing it, it really focuses on the Code of Practice around the members. And what I've asked the planning department to do is to look at that document and to see whether it needs revising as part of the new scheme of delegations that was approved by full council in December, and as part of the ongoing process and review that area is undertaken at the moment. However, regardless of what tweaks they make to that document, it seems to me that it doesn't comfortably sit within the Constitution itself as a document. If it's a training guidance documentation, then it really should sit outside of the Constitution. And for my mind, it would sit within the Code of Governance, which I'll come on to talk to in a short while. So as a training document, I think we remove it if it's still relevant with its various tweaks. If the planning department come back and say, actually, you know what, the new scheme of delegations and the revised terms of reference as part of the planning committee in Article 6, I think it is, they sufficiently deal with this, and this is a training bit that we will do as part of our training for members who sit on that committee, then it would be removed completely. So either way, it's taken out of the Constitution. So it is really just seeking approval for that intention to remove it from the Constitution.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if it shouldn't be made clear to all members, you know, the ones that aren't on the, because we all, in our different wards, we do come up against planning issues, and it might be helpful.
Yeah, I'm not sure it goes into the ins and outs of the planning process, and that was really part of my reasoning for taking it out, as it seemed to be focused more on the softer side of planning consideration by members of the committee. So,
Okay.
But it's part of the ongoing review, but it will sit outside of this review, if I can put it in that way.
All right, members, any comments or questions on this? No?
I think Councillor Mann is
Councillor
indicating,
Mann.
Chairman.
Thank you very much. Certainly the approach or the advice and guidance given to members on the planning committee has changed, you know, in very recent years. For example, we were always told not to meet with objectors if we're on the planning committee in a group, not to meet with a group of objectors, and not to meet with the actual applicants, whether they be an individual developer or sort of an individual householder. That was a very firm advice given for years. But now we're actually proposing something sort of new, entirely new, and therefore I think that the advice must change to members. But I agree with you that it doesn't sit within the Constitution, and if we leave it to the planning officers in conjunction with maybe the chair of planning to come up with something that is relevant now. I think that's possibly the best way to approach it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mann. Do any other members have any thoughts on that? I mean, it immediately came to my mind that with such a fundamental change, as suggested by Councillor Mann, that should, I believe, or I feel, be looked at by a wider group than just the planning committee and or the officers, because there are some very serious, well, it's one of the more serious areas that we deal with in terms of the public. Just thought I'd say that. I don't know if others feel the same way, but Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. I would endorse what you've just said, and I'm not disagreeing with Councillor Mann at all, but I think probably most councillors, if my experience is not atypical, we quite often get approached by either an applicant, it's often a simple application, or a neighbour who's concerned. And I've sought advice on this. I tend to listen to what people have to say, irrespective of who they are, but I try not to give an opinion. So I would support the spirit of of what you just said, Chair, that that once this matter is resolved, and I'm happy with the way it's been dealt with, that any new procedure is explained to every councillor, not just those on the planning committee.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much. So if there are no further comments on this, Kim, please, once again.
No problems. So the council is committed to the 7 principles of good governance, and that's the principles were agreed by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Accountancy and the Society of Local Authority Chief Execs. So in order to support those and to support the work and the principles within the Constitution, it's felt that there's a need to have a code of governance that sits outside the Constitution. That document really would contain all of our kind of the process stuff that supports the work that's set out as principles within the Constitution. So within that, you would have a wide range of policies. So we've already discussed our petition policy, for example. So that would sit within the code of governance. We've also we will be speaking about the contract procedurals, which will become the new suite of procurement policy documents. So that will also sit within the code of governance. But in addition to that, it would also contain our annual governance statement. So that's a document that we produce each year, which reflects on the year's practice. It would have our virtual standing orders, which deal with our meetings, the practice and the policies around our virtual meetings. It would also have your virtual meeting handbook. But in addition, we can include a corruption bribery policy, our member social media policy, the code of conduct complaint process, all of these documents and policy documents, I suppose, that support the work and the principles of the Constitution, but don't necessarily sit within it. So you would have your Constitution, and then you would have our suite of good governance documentation that supports members going forward, and they would be published as they currently are on the council's website. So the intention is to start building that as a process that sits behind the Constitution in the long term.
Thank you very much, Kim. How do they fit? Sorry, these 7 principles of good governance. How do they sit against the Nolan? I was going to say Nolan sisters, the Nolan principles. How?
So they are slightly different to the Nolan principles. The Nolan principles really are around your conduct. These good governance are around having integrity and openness and transparency and that side of things. So they are different principles.
Yeah. Okay.
But there will be an element of dovetailing them.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Any comments, members? No, I don't think so. So is that the final part?
It is, but if I could just update members on the next steps.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
For those that have been ticking off the pages of the current Constitution as we've worked through, which I'm sure you all have, you will notice there are 3 sections that are still yet to come before you. So one is the new Chapter 4, which is our responsibilities and functions. So that's where all of our delegations are going to sit. So that will have our delegations to cabinet members, to our chief officers, down to the relevant heads of service, just so that we have in place all of the delegations under which officers and cabinet members are working. Currently, they're a bit scattered across the current Constitution, and it's quite difficult to pin down what authority you're working under at any given point in time. So the idea is to bring that all into one place. So that will be coming in due course. I've already mentioned the contract procedurals that currently sits within Chapter 2. The intention is to make that part of the code of governance and become a suite of documents around procurement policy. So it will have the start to end finish around how you conduct a procurement, how you do the contract award, what we do around sealing and signing of contracts, how we manage our contract management going forwards, our contract register, making sure we're aware of any variations to contracts, any extensions to contracts. So it will be a complete start to finish process, and that will come in due course for your consideration. And then the final piece is, my mind's gone completely blank. There's one final section and I can't for the life of me remember what it is. No, it's gone, but there's 3 outstanding. Those are the 2. So they will come shortly. Members will recall we were working on the deadline of hopefully having the new revised constitution taken to council on the 29th of March. Financial procedurals, the most important one. I knew there was another one that sets out our financial delegations and financial provisions. Not to stress out our finance team further, as they've been focusing all their attention on getting the budget prepared and going through the consultation process that involves. It's been agreed that will come separately to you as well. So those 3 documents need to come. As a result, we're not going to hit the 29th of March as our intended date, because in order to publish for that, we would have to publish by the 19th of March. And given we're on the 3rd, time is slowly slipping away. So it has been agreed that the new constitution will now go to full council on the 19th of April, so that we still start the new municipal year from the 1st of May with a new governance process and a new constitution in place. So it's not slipped too much, but just due to impact of the 3rd lockdown that we've all had and the focus with officers in other areas, it's just not been possible to hit that deadline as originally promised when we first started out on this process. So I do apologise for that delay, but hopefully members will see that the extra 4 weeks that we've got will be worthwhile. So there will be another meeting. You will have to listen to me further, unfortunately. I'm very sorry for that. But we will get invites out to you as soon as we possibly can, and that will really be based around when we think we will have those documents finished and ready for your consideration, but hopefully it won't be too much longer.
Thank you very much, Kim. So I think and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the 2 main issues that have been suggested as changes are the way reviews are dealt with, to simplify that, and secondly, to remove the call to action, for which there doesn't seem to be a huge appetite. So on that basis, members were asked to note the proposed changes and to agree that comments and suggested amendments will be considered by the monitoring officer and incorporated where necessary ahead of approval by full council.
Chairman, if I may just interrupt, I think Councillor Walsh has indicated he wanted to speak just before we sum up.
My apologies, Councillor Walsh.
No, not
Please.
at all. Thank you. Thanks very much, and to Emma as well. It's just a question for clarity about scrutiny procedure, if I may, and then a very tiny comment. Am I right in thinking that the scrutiny committees are PMB corporate governance standards, but have I left one out?
Yes. So there are 4 scrutiny committees, and you'll recall when we looked at the articles, we agreed that the chairman of the scrutiny committee would also form its own committee so that they can deal with the call to topic. Okay. So there's 5 committees, one of which is just the chairman. It's not a scrutiny function. So and Emma's going to check me. There's the performance management board. There's yourselves, the corporate governance group. There's the community development group, and one other, and I can't remember for the life of me what it is. I failed.
It's the partnership development group.
That was it.
Well done.
Sorry, Kim, I just have one question. I was looking at Appendix 2 in relation to this, and it talks about membership thereof. And in 4.3, it didn't seem very clear to me. It says no cabinet members are not entitled to be a member of a scrutiny committee. Does that mean they can or cannot be a member of such?
It is a typo that has been picked up as part of the consultation. So it will read cabinet members are not entitled.
Right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I'm sorry I didn't, because we'd had so few questions that I wasn't expecting one. So if there are no further comments, as I say, we're asked to note the proposed changes and to agree that comments and suggested amendments will be considered by the monitoring officer and incorporated when necessary ahead of approval by full council. Members, I will take your silence as assent. However, if a member wishes to raise an issue, please indicate via the chat function. May I have members' agreement that we approve the report? Right, I think that is approval. Thank you, members. Your silence is agreement. Members, this item concludes our official business for this evening. I will therefore close the meeting of the Corporate Governance Group at 11 minutes past 8. Thank you, members, for your attention or your attendance this evening, and for those watching the broadcast via the Council's YouTube channel. I'll now hand over to the meeting facilitator.
Thank you, Chairman and members. Members, before I ask the webcasting officer to terminate the broadcast, I'd like to remind you that the Council retain performance data relating to your connection to this meeting in the event that we have a legal challenge to the way we've held this meeting. Please can the webcasting officer terminate the broadcast and confirm, please?